chirping is feelsome, the BFG said. Us giants is never doing it. But with your drink, Sophie said, what was it you called it? Frobscottle, said the BFG. With Frobscottle, Sophie said, the bubbles in your tummy will be going downwards, and that could have a far nastier result. Why nasty? Asked the BFG, frowning. Because, Sophie said, blushing a little, if they go down instead of up, they'll be coming out somewhere else with an even louder and ruder noise. A whiz-popper, cried the BFG, beaming at her. Us giants is making whiz-poppers all the time. Whiz-popping is a sign of happiness. It is music in our ears. You surely is not telling me that a little whiz-popping is forbidden among human beings? It is considered extremely rude, Sophie said. But you is whiz-popping, is you not, now and again? Asked the BFG. Everyone is whiz-popping, if that's what you call it, Sophie said. Kings and queens are whiz-popping, presidents are whiz-popping, glamorous film stars are whiz-popping, little babies are whiz-popping. But where I come from, it is not polite to talk about it. Redunculous, said the BFG. If everyone is making whiz-poppers, then why not talk about it? We is now having a swiggle of this delicious frobscottle, and you will see the happy result. The BFG shook the bottle vigorously. The pale green stuff fizzed and bubbled. He removed the cork and took a tremendous gurgling swig. It's glummy, he cried. I love it. For a few moments, the big friendly giant stood quite still, and a look of absolute ecstasy began to spread over his long, wrinkly face. Then suddenly the heavens opened, and he let fly with a series of the loudest and rudest noises Sophie had ever heard in her life. They reverberated around the walls of the cave like thunder, and the glass jars rattled on their shelves. But most astonishing of all, the force of the explosion actually lifted the enormous giant clear off his feet like a rocket. Whoopee! He cried when he came down to earth again. Now that is whiz-popping for you. Sophie burst out laughing. She couldn't help it. Have some yourself, cried the BFG, tipping the neck of the enormous bottle towards her. Don't you have a cup? Sophie said. No cups, only bottle. Sophie opened her mouth, and very gently the BFG tipped the bottle forward and poured some of the fabulous frobscottle down her throat. And oh gosh, how delicious it was! It was sweet and refreshing. It tasted of vanilla and cream, with just the faintest trace of raspberries on the edge of the flavour. And the bubbles were wonderful. Sophie could actually feel them bouncing and bursting all around her tummy. It was an amazing sensation. It felt as though hundreds of tiny people were dancing a jig inside her and tickling her with their toes. It was lovely. It's lovely, she cried. Just wait, said the BFG, flapping his ears. Sophie could feel the bubbles travelling lower and lower down her tummy, and then suddenly, inevitably, the explosion came. The trumpet sounded, and she too made the walls of the cavern ring with the sound of music and thunder. Bravo! Shouted the BFG, waving the bottle. You is very good for a beginner. Let's have some more. Journey to Dream Country. After the mad frobscottle party was over, Sophie settled herself again on top of the enormous table. You is feeling better now? Asked the big friendly giant. Much better, thank you, Sophie said. Whenever I is feeling a bit scrotty, the BFG said, a few gollops of frobscottle is always making me hopscotchy again. I must say it's quite an experience, Sophie said. It's a Raz-Twizzler, the BFG said. It's gloriumptious. He turned away and strode across the cave and picked up his dream-catching net. I is galloping off now, he said, to catch some more whoopsie-whiffin dreams for my collection. I's doing this every day without missing. Is you wishing to come with me? Not me, thank you very much, Sophie said. Not with those other giants lurking outside. I is snuggling you very cosy into the pocket of my waistcoat, the BFG said. Then no one is seeing you. Before Sophie could protest, he had picked her up off the table and popped her into the waistcoat pocket. There was plenty of room in there. Is you wishing for a little hole to peep out from? He asked her. There's one here already, she said. She had found a small hole in the pocket, and when she put one eye close to it, she could see out very well indeed. She watched the BFG as he bent down and filled his suitcase with empty glass jars. He closed the lid, picked up the suitcase in one hand, took the pole with the net on the end in the other hand, and marched towards the entrance of the cave. As soon as he was outside, the BFG set off across the great hot yellow wasteland where the blue rocks lay and the dead trees stood and where all the other giants were sulking about. Sophie, squatting low on her heels in the pocket of the leather waistcoat, had one eye glued to the little hole. She saw the group of enormous giants about 300 yards ahead. Hold your breaths, the BFG whispered down to her. Cross your fingers. Here we go. We is going right past all these other giants. Is you seeing that whopping great one, the one nearest to us? I see him, Sophie whispered back, quivering. That is the horriblest of them all, and the biggest of them all. He is called the flesh-lump-eating giant. I don't want to hear about him, Sophie said. He is 54 feet high, the BFG said softly as he jogged along, and he is swallowing human beings like they is sugar lumps, 2 or 3 at a time. You're making me nervous, Sophie said. I is nervous myself, the BFG whispered. I always gets a jumpsy as a jog hopper when the flesh lump eating giant is around. Keep away from him, Sophie pleaded. Not possible, the BFG answered. He is galloping easily 2 times as quickly as me. Shall we turn back? Sophie said. Turning back is worse, the BFG said. If they is seeing me running away, they is all giving chase and throwing rocks. They would never eat you, though, would they? Sophie asked. Giants is never guzzling other giants, the BFG said. They is fighting and squabbling a lot with each other, but never guzzling. Human beings is more tasty to them. The giants had already spotted the BFG and all heads were turned, watching him as he jogged forward. He was aiming to pass well to the right of the group. Through her little peephole, Sophie saw the flesh-lump-eating giant moving over to intercept them. He didn't hurry. He just loped over casually to a point where the BFG would have to pass. The others loped after him. Sophie counted 9 of them altogether, and she recognized the blood bottler in the middle of them. They were bored. They had nothing to do until nightfall. There was an air of menace about them as they loped slowly across the plain, with long, lolloping strides, heading for the BFG. "Here comes the runty one," boomed the flesh-lump eater. "Ho, ho there, runty one. Where is you splatchwinkling away to in such a hefty hurry?" He shot out an enormous arm and grabbed the BFG by the hair. The BFG didn't struggle. He simply stopped and stood quite still and said, "Be so kind as to be letting go of my hair, flesh-lump eater." The flesh-lump eater released him and stepped back a pace. The other giants stood around, waiting for the fun to start. "Now then, you little grob-squiffler," boomed the flesh-lump eater. "We is all of us wanting to know where you is galloping off to every day in the daytime. Nobody ought to be galloping off to anywhere until it is getting dark. The human beings could easily be spotting you and starting a giant hunt, and we is not wanting that to happen, is we not? We is not," shouted the other giants. "Go back to your cave, runty one." "I's not galloping to any human being country," the BFG said. "I is going to other places." "I is thinking," said the flesh-lump eater, "that you is catching human beings and keeping them as pets." "Right you is," cried the blood bottler. "Just now I's hearing him chittering away to one of them in his cave." "You is welcome to go and search my cave from frack to bunt," the BFG answered. "You can go looking into every crook and nanny. There is no human beings or stringy beans or runner beans or jelly beans or any other beans in there." Sophie crouched still as a mouse inside the BFG's pocket. She hardly dared breathe. She was terrified she might sneeze. The slightest sound or movement would give her away.